I never thought Mother's Day, the one day I used to feel seen, would be the day my own son made me disappear. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, a soft little package resting on my lap. A hand-knit scarf I made for Amanda, my daughter-in-law. Pale lavender, her favorite color, at least that's what she told me the day she married my son. Their living room buzzed with laughter, champagne glasses clinking, the smell of something fancy coming out of their oven. Amanda's family was there, all glossy hair and manicured smiles. I felt a little out of place, but I smiled anyway. That's what mothers do. Then came the moment. My son Mark, my baby boy, the one I raised alone after his father walked out, stood in front of the whole group with a flourish. "And for the most amazing woman in my life," he said, beaming. I held my breath. He turned to Amanda's mother and handed her a velvet box and car keys. "A cruise and a new hybrid SUV. You deserve the best." The room erupted in applause. I laughed politely. I mean, surely he hadn't forgotten me. Surely there was more. When the noise settled, I looked at him with a smile. "And for you, Mom," he said, glancing my way, "your gift is the most valuable of all. You woke up this morning." Laughter. All around. Amanda chuckled, even clapped. Her mother looked smug. I blinked. Just blinked. My hands tightened around the scarf, now suddenly ridiculous. A $12 gift against a luxury vacation. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I sat there, invisible, while they took pictures with the keys, with the tickets, with the woman who had, apparently, raised him better than I did. I placed the scarf on the table. Quietly, I found my purse, and I walked out. He didn't follow me, not that day, not the next. And that's when I knew, my place in his life had quietly expired. And nobody had bothered to tell me. The next morning, I sat in my tiny kitchen with a chipped mug of tea warming my hands. The silence felt louder than ever, no card, no call, no apology. But it wasn't about the card. Lord knows I've never been one to count gifts or expect roses. It was what he said. The joke. The way he looked at me when he said it, like I was an old coat someone forgot to hang up. "The most valuable gift for you is waking up in the morning." That sentence, it echoed in my chest like an empty hallway. He said it with a smirk, like I was just the comic relief in his grown-up life now. I raised that boy on my own. Held his feverish body through sleepless nights. Went hungry more times than I'll ever admit, just so he could have enough. Sold my wedding ring once when his shoes had holes in them. And now? I was the punchline. I stared at the bare table in front of me. No note, no flower, just me, the mug, and a quiet house that used to be filled with dreams. And I realized something I hadn't dared admit before. It wasn't the gift that hurt. It was the message that I didn't matter anymore. I wasn't his anchor. I was baggage. You give a person everything, your time, your body, your years, and one day they turn around and act like you were never there. And still I waited for a text. A knock. Something. But the phone stayed cold. Like me. I got up, set the mug in the sink, and looked out the window. Rain drizzled against the glass, just enough to blur the trees. Funny how the weather can read your heart sometimes. He didn't even know he'd broken it. That's what got me. He didn't see me flinch. Didn't think twice. Because when you're invisible, your pain doesn't register. But I felt something stirring in me. Not sadness. Not yet. Something older. Heavier. The kind of feeling that makes you stop waiting for someone to remember you, and start remembering yourself. Some wounds don't come from yesterday. They come from way back, from memories that still live under your skin. This morning, after that cold tea and colder silence, I found myself drifting back 30 years, to a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Mark was 6. He had pneumonia. His little body burned like fire, and I didn't leave his side for 3 nights. I held his hand so tight my fingers cramped. I whispered lullabies. I made deals with God. His father was long gone by then. Walked out when the diapers got expensive and the nights got long. So it was just me and Mark. Always me and Mark. I used to rock him in that cracked vinyl chair next to the hospital bed, humming that old lullaby, Cielito Lindo, over and over until we both fell asleep. I was 28, tired, scared, broke, and determined. There were no cruises, no new cars. But I showed up. Always. He used to look at me like I hung the stars. And now? Now, he gives cruises to Amanda's mother and tells me waking up is gift enough. Like I'm a charity case. Like I should be grateful to still exist in his world. I blinked hard, sitting there on the edge of my bed, remembering his tiny fingers clutching mine. How could a child so warm become a man so cold? But I know how. Piece by piece. It doesn't happen all at once. Life gets easier for them, and suddenly, you're just background noise. Still, the memory gave me clarity. I didn't imagine who I was to him once. I was everything, and maybe that's why it hurts so much now. I gave him everything, and somewhere along the way, I stopped asking for anything back. Well, that ends now. 2 days later, I found myself standing in front of the local bank. I hadn't planned to go there, at least, not that week. But something was gnawing at me, whispering under my ribs. Years ago, I added Mark's name to the deed of my second property. Just in case something ever happens to me, I told him. Back then, it felt smart. Loving, even. But now? Now I wasn't so sure. The teller recognized me. "Hi, Mrs. Bennett," she smiled. "Need help with something?" I nodded. "I'd like to review the deed on my rental property. The one on Melrose. I just want to make sure everything's still in order." She directed me to the manager's office. A woman named Dana, young, polished, with kind eyes. She typed something into her computer, paused, and tilted her head. "That's odd," she murmured. "It looks like the property is fully under Mark Bennett's name now. The change was made 6 months ago." My heart dropped. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She turned the monitor slightly toward me. "It shows here that he submitted a notarized deed transfer. Your name was removed from the title entirely." I stared at the screen. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I never signed anything," I whispered. "I never agreed to that." Dana's smile faded. "Would you like me to print the file? Maybe show it to a lawyer?" I nodded. My hands were cold as ice. I left the bank clutching a folder I didn't ask for, proof that my own son had quietly taken what wasn't his. Not with a conversation, not even a warning. He hadn't just humiliated me. He stole from me. And suddenly, the silence from him after Mother's Day made perfect sense. I met Helen at the corner cafe we've been going to for years. The kind of place with chipped mugs and real butter. No fancy syrups. No judgment. She could tell something was off the moment I sat down. "You didn't even order pie," she said. "That bad, huh?" I slid the folder across the table. She opened it slowly, skimmed the pages. I watched her jaw tighten. "He took the house," I said flatly. "The one I planned to leave to the grandkids. The one I bought with the insurance money after their father died." Helen closed the folder gently. "Like it might explode." "I thought I was just putting his name on it for emergencies," I added. "You know, so there wouldn't be court delays or probate." She looked up at me, and there was no pity in her eyes, only concern. "Maybe it's time to stop assuming he's protecting your interests," she said softly. "Maybe he's protecting his own." I stared at her, stunned. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they made too much sense. "I raised him to be better than this," I whispered. "Didn't I?" "You raised him with love," she said. "But love can't make someone honest if they don't want to be." A waitress came by to refill our coffee, but neither of us touched it. "What are you going to do?" Helen asked finally. I shook my head. "I don't know. I feel stupid." She reached across the table, put her hand on mine. "You're not stupid. You're trusting. There's a difference." I smiled, a little. Just enough to keep from crying. But inside, I was already taking inventory. Not of money, but of truth. Because once you know what someone's capable of, you don't look at them the same again. I made the appointment with the lawyer that same afternoon. A quiet little office downtown, tucked between a nail salon and an insurance agency. No marble floors. No receptionist with a headset. Just a small bell that jingled when I opened the door. Her name was Rebecca. Mid-40s. Clear eyes. Wore her hair in a bun that had clearly been redone in the car. I liked her immediately. She didn't interrupt. Didn't rush me. Just listened. I laid it all out. The property. The deed transfer. The forged initials. The gut feeling I couldn't shake. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled through her nose. What your son did is legal, technically, she said. But if you never agreed to that transfer, and especially if your signature was forged, we have something to work with. I swallowed hard. She continued, it falls under undue influence. Maybe even elder exploitation. We'd need to be careful. Strategic. But yes, we might have a way. I looked around the office. Bare walls. One tired-looking plant in the corner. But suddenly, the space felt like a fortress. Can we do this quietly? I asked. Absolutely, she said. The last thing you want is to alert them before we gather proof. I nodded. It was strange. I'd come in expecting to feel helpless. But I didn't. Not anymore. There was a path now. A way back to dignity, not through shouting or begging, but through truth. And if Mark thought I was too old, too soft, or too stupid to fight back, well, he'd just made the first of many mistakes. I spent the next day at home, knee-deep in boxes I hadn't touched in years. Old tax returns, emails I'd printed, property documents, utility bills, insurance statements. Every scrap of paper that might hold a clue. My dining table disappeared under the weight of it all. I didn't move quickly. I moved methodically. I wasn't just looking for proof, I was looking for patterns. Then I saw it. Tucked between a water bill and an old birthday card was a photocopy of the deed transfer. The same one Rebecca had mentioned. And there, at the bottom, were my initials. Not my signature. Just initials. Jagged, tight, and wrong. My handwriting's never been neat, but I know the slope of my own letters. The way my D curls at the top. This wasn't it. My hands began to shake. I sat down, hard, and just stared at it. He had forged me. Not only had Mark gone behind my back, he had looked me in the eye at dinner, at birthdays, during holidays, and smiled while knowing this was done. I took out an old notepad and wrote my initials over and over, comparing them to the ones on the deed. It was like watching someone else pretend to be me. Like a stranger in my skin. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not from rage. From grief. Because betrayal is one thing. But betrayal by the child you carried, the one who once cried in your arms, that's something else. That's a death you don't bury in a casket. You carry it inside you. But then I remembered Rebecca's voice. We have something to work with. And suddenly, my shaking stopped. Because I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Now, I had evidence. And the next move would be mine. I wasn't expecting to see Amanda that day. I was just running errands, trying to breathe through the fog in my chest. A quick stop at the grocery store turned into something else entirely. She saw me before I saw her. I was loading a bag of potatoes into my trunk when her voice floated over the parking lot, too sweet, too loud. Dulce. I turned, slowly. She looked radiant, of course. Lipstick perfect, nails fresh, hair curled like she had nowhere better to be but everywhere important to go. She walked up with that smug little strut she'd perfected since the wedding I wasn't invited to. I just wanted to say hello, she said, sunglasses sliding down her nose. Mark and I are so excited. We're remodeling the house on Melrose soon. You should drive by while it still looks familiar. She smiled, tilted her head like she was posing for a photo. The words hit me harder than any slap. The house. My house. They weren't just ignoring me, they were celebrating what they stole. Throwing it in my face. Like they wanted me to know. I forced a smile. Remodeling? She nodded. Kitchen first. I've always hated those cabinets. And we might open up the dining room, too. Mark says it's time we make it ours. Ours. That word twisted in my stomach. And just like that, I realized this wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't just Mark being careless or blind. It was planned. They knew what they were doing. Every step, every signature, every smile. And now, they wanted to savor the victory. I looked down at my groceries. Bread, milk, potatoes, the essentials, while they built a future on the bones of my past. Amanda leaned in, as if to whisper something tender. You know, she said softly, you've always been so generous. But sometimes generosity turns into confusion. I blinked, and then I smiled. A new kind of smile. The kind that doesn't reach the eyes. I'm not confused, I said. Not anymore. And I shut the trunk. 2 days later, I walked into the county courthouse with a folder under my arm and steel in my spine. The building smelled like old paper and floor wax. I'd only been here once before, years ago, when I filed the paperwork to finalize my husband's estate. Back then, I was grieving. Uncertain. This time, I was focused. Rebecca met me outside the filing office. She wore a dark blazer, her hair in a tight braid. Professional, sharp, but kind. You sure you want to do this? She asked. I should have done it months ago, I replied. We stepped inside, and she handed over the forms. A quiet little stack of printed paper that would stop Mark and Amanda from doing anything further with my property, at least for now. We're filing a motion to contest the deed transfer, Rebecca explained to the clerk. On the basis of forgery, fraud, and lack of informed consent. The clerk nodded, stamped the papers, and slid a receipt across the counter. Just like that, it was official. The house couldn't be sold. Couldn't be refinanced. Couldn't be touched, until a judge reviewed the case. It wasn't a victory yet. Not even close. But it was something. Proof that I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. Rebecca walked me back out to the street. The sun was warm. The air smelled faintly of grilled onions from a cart nearby. Now we wait, she said. But you did the right thing. If they try anything now, they'll hit a wall. I looked down at my copy of the filing. Legal language. Bold type. My name, my real, full name, at the top. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I still didn't know how this would end. But now, the story wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine again. A week later, Rebecca called me. Don't panic, she said, but Mark just tried to refinance the Melrose property. I was sitting in my living room, flipping through a gardening catalog I wasn't really reading. What happened? I asked, voice calm. The bank stopped the process, she replied. Our legal motion triggered a flag. They froze the application pending the outcome of the case. I didn't say anything at first. Just let the silence hang between us, like laundry drying in the sun. He doesn't know why yet, she added. But I'm sure he will soon. I smiled to myself. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was something close. Because I could picture it. Mark sitting at some sleek office desk, pen in hand, trying to sign papers for a loan that wouldn't go through. Amanda probably beside him, flipping through paint samples, already planning the new kitchen. And suddenly, nothing. A pause. A red flag. A door that wouldn't open. I didn't call him. Didn't warn him. Didn't gloat. I just went into my garden and trimmed the dead roses. It felt good to cut away what no longer served me. Let him wonder. Let him sweat. I'd spent too many years giving him everything, money, support, trust. Now I was giving him something new, silence. Because sometimes silence is louder than any scream. And sometimes justice starts with a locked door. That afternoon, I went out to my garden with pruning shears in one hand and a quiet ache in my chest. The roses had overgrown. Wild, thorny, tangled, like my thoughts. I knelt in the dirt, the sun warm on my back, and started cutting. There's something holy about tending to a garden. Something no one tells you. You get to decide what stays and what goes. You shape it, not with noise, not with speed, but with patience. As I clipped away the dry petals and overgrown stems, I realized something. I used to blame myself. For Mark's distance. For Amanda's coldness. For the way I'd become background noise in the life I helped build. I used to tell myself maybe I gave too much. Maybe I smothered him. Maybe I should have let him fall once or twice instead of always catching him. But now I saw it clearly. It wasn't about loving too much. It was about forgetting to love myself, too. I sat back on my heels, dirt under my fingernails, my breath steady. I wasn't just his mother. I was a woman who had survived heartbreak, widowhood, and raising a child alone. A woman who had kept the lights on, who had gone without, who had smiled through empty holidays and stretched casseroles to feed more than they should. And I was done apologizing for expecting respect. I wiped the sweat from my brow, looked out over the roses, and whispered, maybe to God, maybe just to the wind, I'm still here. Not broken, not bitter, just awake and ready. Rebecca and I met again in her conference room, a square little space with fluorescent lights and a window that faced a brick wall. Not much to look at. But that day, it felt like a war room. We're building this case like a house, she said, spreading documents across the table. No shortcuts. No cracks. We had the deed with the forged initials. That was our foundation. But we needed more. So we started digging. I found emails, casual ones, from when Mark asked for extra money for Amanda's medical expenses, money that mysteriously matched the month the property transfer took place. Rebecca called the bank and got statements from the notary's office. Turns out, the signature wasn't even notarized in person. We pulled in testimony from 2 bank employees who remembered my confusion when I asked about the property title last month. One of them even wrote a statement. She seemed genuinely shocked. Said she never signed anything. I brought in an old neighbor who used to see Mark stop by, always when I wasn't home. Even my doctor helped. She'd seen me weeks after the transfer, confused and tearful, not understanding why I was getting fewer updates on the house repairs. All of it went into a folder. Brick by brick, fact by fact. Rebecca looked at me over the pile. This is strong, not just morally, legally. I nodded, but my hands were folded tightly in my lap. I don't want revenge, I told her. I want my life back. You're going to get it, she said. But we'll do it quietly, strategically, with dignity. It was the first time someone had said that to me in months. With dignity, not pity, not panic, just power. And I realized, as I stood up to leave, that the woman walking out of that office wasn't the same woman who walked in weeks ago. That woman had been betrayed. This one? This one was prepared. He showed up without warning. I was on the front porch, trimming the dead leaves off a potted fern, when I saw his car pull up. He stepped out holding a bouquet, bright supermarket flowers still in plastic wrap. Mark, my son, the boy I raised and the man I no longer recognized. Hey, Mom, he said, walking up slowly. I heard about the court thing. The court thing, as if it were a parking ticket. As if he didn't know exactly what he had done. He handed me the flowers. I thought we could talk. I took them, more out of reflex than warmth. They smelled like nothing, just color and water and the weight of guilt dressed up as kindness. Or maybe not guilt. No, something else. I looked closer. He wasn't sorry. He was scared. I could see it in his jaw, clenched just a little too tight. In the way his eyes darted to the front door, like Amanda might be watching from the car. Like this wasn't his idea. You filed something serious, Mom, he said. We don't have to go through with this. We? I mean, we're family. Family. The word sat between us like a rotting fruit. I smiled softly, not warmly, not bitterly, just knowingly. You should save your breath, Mark, I said. For your lawyer. He flinched like I'd slapped him. I looked down at the bouquet, then back at him. You once told me waking up was the most valuable gift, I said. And you were right. I walked back inside without another word, leaving him standing there, empty-handed. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, because the louder sound was the one inside him now, panic. And I didn't need to raise my voice. He was finally listening. The family courtroom wasn't grand. No marble columns, no echoing gavel strikes. Just a tired judge, a worn carpet, and a handful of strangers waiting for their names to be called. Mark sat across from me, clean-shaven, tie slightly crooked, eyes flicking around the room like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. Amanda sat beside him, arms crossed, lips tight. She didn't look at me once. His lawyer, a slick young man with too much gel and not enough experience, stood and spoke first. My client believed the property was gifted to him. There was no coercion, no foul play. It was a family arrangement. The judge nodded. And the mother? Mrs. Bennett? Rebecca stood, calm, collected. Her voice was steady as she handed over the documents. There was no discussion, no agreement. In fact, the signature on this deed, she said, holding up the page, is not consistent with any previous legal signature by my client. We have handwriting samples, witness statements, and a timeline that proves she was unaware of the transfer until recently. The judge took the paper, adjusted his glasses, and studied it closely. I glanced over. Mark looked like he'd swallowed a rock. His lawyer leaned over and whispered something urgently. Amanda's face turned red, not from embarrassment, from fury. They hadn't expected this. They thought I'd cry, or fumble, or forgive. But I didn't. Because when you're holding the truth, you don't need theatrics. You just need to show up. The judge cleared his throat. We'll reconvene for a judgment in 1 week. In the meantime, this court places a freeze on any further financial activity related to the contested property. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. Amanda stared at me, finally. Her eyes said, "How dare you?" Mine said, "Watch me." The hallway outside the courtroom smelled like lemon cleaner and tension. I was walking toward the elevators when I heard his voice behind me. "Mom, wait." I didn't turn around. He caught up, stepped in front of me. That same face I'd kissed 1,000 times when he was small, now drawn, desperate, older than it should have been. "You're ruining my life," he said, his voice low and sharp. I looked at him. "No, Mark," I said quietly. "You did that when you forged my name and stole my home." He blinked, like he hadn't expected me to say it out loud. Like hearing it from my mouth made it real. "I didn't mean to," Amanda said. I held up my hand. "Stop." His jaw clenched. "I'm your son." I nodded slowly. "You were." His face twisted. "You're going to end up alone, you know that?" I stared at him. This man I had once rocked to sleep in the crook of my arm. This man who now stood in front of me with fear disguised as anger. "You stopped being my son the day you became a thief," I said calmly. "And you lost the right to worry about my loneliness the day you made me invisible in your life." He shook his head, almost laughing. "So that's it?" I stepped past him toward the elevator. "Happy belated Mother's Day, Mark." The doors slid open. I didn't look back. 1 week later, I stood once again in that same courtroom. This time, there were no nerves. Just calm, like the moment before the tide pulls back. The judge entered, glasses perched low, expression unreadable. He didn't waste time. After reviewing all submitted documents, witness statements, and handwriting analysis, the court finds sufficient evidence of fraud and unlawful transfer of property. Therefore, ownership of the Melrose house is restored to Mrs. Bennett, effective immediately. He paused. Let the words settle like dust on polished wood. Furthermore, the court imposes a financial penalty on Mr. Mark Bennett for attempting to misappropriate property under false pretenses. Amanda gasped. Mark's lawyer turned a shade paler. Rebecca remained still beside me. Hands folded. Her only movement was the smallest nod. Me? I didn't smile. But my heart did. The judge tapped his gavel. Court adjourned. As people stood, Amanda grabbed her purse and stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots across the tile floor. Mark sat frozen for a moment. Then stood up slowly, avoiding my eyes. He didn't say a word. Didn't apologize. Didn't try. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. He thought this would end the way everything else had, with me backing down. But not this time. As I left the courtroom, the late afternoon sun hit my face. It felt warm. True. The kind of warmth that doesn't ask permission. It just arrives when it's earned. 2 weeks after the ruling, I stood in my kitchen with a warm cup of tea, watching a moving truck back into the driveway of the Melrose house. From my window, I saw Mark standing on the curb, arms crossed, jaw tight. Amanda paced nearby, shouting into her phone. Boxes piled on the grass. A shattered picture frame glinted under the morning sun. They were leaving. The remodel would never happen. The dreams they built on my silence had crumbled, quietly, legally, completely. And me? I felt whole. Not triumphant. Not vengeful. Just whole. I turned back to the table where Helen sat, stirring honey into her tea. "Well," she said, "how's it feel?" I took a sip, closed my eyes. "It feels like breathing again," I said. Because it wasn't about the house. Or the money. Or even the judgment. It was about reclaiming the version of myself I'd buried under years of sacrifice. I had loved my son. I still did, somewhere deep beneath the scars. But I finally loved myself more. Helen smiled. "You know, you look taller." I laughed. "That's the weight I've been carrying all these years. It's gone." I walked to the sink, rinsed my cup, and looked outside one last time. They were gone. I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer. He once said the most valuable gift was waking up in the morning. I looked at my reflection in the window. Today, I woke up smiling.